You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options. Facebook.com/TheOptionsInsider or via questions at TheOptionsInsider.com.
Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
All right, welcome back to Options Insider Radio, the interview program here on the old network where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of options and derivatives and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. If we sound a little bit different, because we're not coming to you from our studios in Chicago, coming to you from scenic and sunny Florida at the CBOE Risk Management Conference here in Bonita Springs, Florida. And I'm pleased to be joined by our next guest. He is a newcomer to the program. He is Jon Cherry, the head of U.S. options over there at Northern Trust. Jon, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here, Mark.
And Jon, as we are wont to do with all of our first-timers here on the network, why don't you go ahead and give our audience a little bit of an overview of your background in the options space and how you found your way over there to Northern Trust.
Happy to. So, my background is such where I'm an options trader, primarily servicing the asset management community, hedge funds, RIAs, doing options execution on their behalf. I shut down the producing group I had in 2015 in order to go to Northern Trust and develop U.S. options for Northern.
And a lot of people listening to this, particularly people who are in the space a lot, might be kind of surprised when they see the title of this and say Northern Trust. What are they doing on the Options Insider Radio Networks? Maybe let's start there. Actually, it was quite frankly, when you guys reached out to me, I was a little surprised myself. I said, Northern Trust, what are they doing in options? So I will put that same question to you, Jon. Northern Trust, what are you guys doing in options?
Sure, it's a fair question. The Northern Trust Capital Markets is where I kind of sit within the organization. We service FX, brokerage solutions, and securities lending. Within brokerage, we certainly have equities and options and fixed income trading. As I mentioned earlier, before 2015, options was not a core competency of what we were doing within capital markets. There was certainly a need from our clients to service this type of business, and so Northern brought me in-house to kind of run this area and build it out as we kind of see fit as an organization. We service two main client segments, asset owners and asset managers. Along those lines, on asset owners, we service family offices, pensions and endowments, foundations. Asset managers, kind of my bread and butter background of hedge fund execution and RIAs.
So what kind of services are you guys providing to them? If a typical family office or advisor, do they call you up and say, hey, I want to hedge my portfolio, how do I do that? Or is it maybe you guys are constructing overlays, or you mentioned execution, you're helping them execution? Is it maybe a mix of all of the above? What are you guys typically doing on an average day over there?
It's a mix of all of the above. And so kind of how I think about how we're looking at U.S. options is kind of the following. So within Northern, we have a clearing and execution business. We are an IDB. We clear through NFS, which is owned by Fidelity, and we service kind of the clearing and execution needs of our asset owner clients. The other facet is where we're seeing a significant amount of growth is in our execution-only business, where we're servicing asset managers, and where we're looking at hedge funds looking to trade on their behalf, whether or not that is irrespective of custodying at Northern Trust or not.
Would you say there's a primary use case? Are you mostly getting calls? Maybe let's take the last few weeks, let's put those aside for now. That's obviously a little bit of a different sample set, but maybe in general, are you mostly getting calls for, people saying, hey, explain what these options things are to me and why should I use them? Or is it mostly, do they mostly want to hedge? What kind of, are they looking for income? What would you say is the kind of general, most common use case you're encountering?
We see it mainly in three buckets. And the three buckets are overlay solutions, protective investments, i.e. hedging, and they're looking to go short or long volatility. And so what that means, kind of broken out, and how I view the world within Northern, is our asset owner type clients are either internally managed, doing those type of solution sets, or they're outsourcing third-party managers, and we are interfacing directly with those asset managers themselves.
So someone call you up and you could literally buy the puts for them, or you can construct, let's say, a collar for them or something along those lines, or even just, in general, say, hey, here's a nice income trade, and that you can actually execute it for them and do the whole 9 yards from that perspective.
That's correct.
So that's in this day and age, maybe another question is interesting too, because like I said, I was kind of surprised when you guys reached out to me. Was there a lot of pent up or demand coming from Northern Trust's initial client base? Are they really interested in options, or is it something you find yourself having to kind of maybe contact them and reach out to them and prompt them and say, hey, here's what we're doing now with options. Are you interested? Are you seeing a lot of nascent demand from your existing clientele for options, or you have to kind of go out and work for it and explain to them?
It's truly on both sides of the spectrum. There is a subset of clients that we've learned are doing this business away from Northern, and so we look at that as a strong opportunity set for Northern to put that hat on and compete for that business. But then we also saw a fair amount of quantity demanded where there was a need for option-based strategies to be within these portfolios.
And obviously, as I mentioned, the last month has been an interesting time for these sorts of things. I'm curious, from your perspective, what has the last month been like? What have your clients' responses been? Have they been calling up panicking? Is this an opportunity for them? And you guys obviously managing the portfolios for them. Walk us through and walk our listeners through what the last month has been like for you guys.
It's been fun, and I'd even broaden that to kind of late fourth quarter, is we saw based on a whole handful of reasons, but let's just take high valuations or a rising U.S. equity market being quote overvalued or in a thin atmosphere, whatever term you might want to use that's commonly said, is we saw that as an opportunity to have more conversations with clients, talk to them about things they could be thinking about on the protection side of the market, outside of kind of the rules-based strategies, and where can we be opportunistic in putting in protection. And so, nobody had a crystal ball necessarily, but to see how the next 8 weeks played out, it was those were times where we actually saw our hedges work. As a little bit of an aside, most of our clients are just very long-term investors. They've already made their wealth. This is a way to preserve them, and so it's a natural conversation for us to have on the protection side of that market. And so when we saw that correction, that 6-7% that we saw fall in a relatively short fashion with the vol spike that we had, we were taking off our positions, advising our clients that, hey, maybe we've seen this correction come through. Why don't we take off our protection and reassess?
That's interesting because, it's in a period where you're right, we're coming into fourth quarter, everyone was saying, where did the vol go? When are we going to see vol again? And then it returned in spades over the course of the last month, maybe to the point where maybe a little bit of a good thing is, and then a lot of a good thing is and ultimately a bad thing. I often refer to it as there's that point maybe when the VIX is like 35 or so, where people kind of just want to take their ball and go home. This is too much for me. I'm out of this. I'm going to wait till things cool down. It sounds like that wasn't the case with your clients, because you kind of worry in an environment like that. Maybe people are somewhat new to options. They see all this tumult, all this turmoil, all this volatility, and they may say, that's it. I'm out of this at least for the time being. It sounds like that wasn't the case at Northern. They were actually intrigued by this. Exactly,
and I think it goes back to our consultative approach that we have with clients. I mean, we're talking with these clients sometimes multiple times per day, and it ranges from any level of sophistication, kind of your most sophisticated asset managers down to the retail investor.
And what would you say are the big products that you guys are using? You manage a lot. You mentioned a lot of broad funds, so I imagine a lot of big index funds are in there. But so is that the primary use case? Maybe an SPX or SPY, overlays or puts, or are you doing a lot of single name equity options, or are you doing maybe some of the more esoteric volatility products? What are you guys dabbling in on a day in, day out basis?
So within that's a great question, and the reason is because with where we sit within capital markets, for all intent and purpose, we're a sell side. We're a broker-dealer, no different than some of our competitors. And so we actually look at any opportunity as a blank canvas and solving for what objective our client might have. For example, if you have a diversified U.S. equity portfolio and you're looking to just generate income, we can either work with your third-party manager or develop a solution with you directly and walk you through single-name securities, whether that's going to be on the individual assets or do something if it's highly correlated to an ETF or index. So, and the other side of it is, if you are, you're kind of a larger pension fund or public fund or whatever that might be, and you're working with a third-party manager, us interfacing directly with that RAA or asset manager that you're working with, making sure that we're trading on your behalf, and finding you the best price and liquidity sourcing per the needs of the mandate.
We're at volatility conference. Obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask you. I'm kind of getting the pulse of everyone in our network on this topic. It's been a hot topic, as you might imagine, over the past few weeks, is kind of the explosion and then subsequent implosion of the inverse volatility space in particular. Your SIVs, your SVXYs. I'm curious, obviously you deal with a lot of clients at the end of the day. I'm sure some of them had some exposure to these products. What are your thoughts on maybe those products in general, and then B, what we saw unfold in them over the past, let's say, month, where we have the acceleration events in XIV, which that product is effectively no more, and then you have SVXY being dramatically curtailed as a result of those events. So I'm curious, let's start there. What are your thoughts on the broad space, and then we'll get into maybe the products themselves?
Well, there's no doubt that ETFs in general and ETNs in general have a growing popularity just based on their passive nature. In my experience, particularly at Northern, we don't necessarily see a lot of our clients going into those type of products. Where we're seeing that the most growth come from is with hiring active managers on a third-party basis, where they're outsourcing that fiduciary responsibility to a sophisticated manager in the active space. So I don't really have a lot of experience on those specific products in particular.
So you guys would probably advocate to them instead, come with us and let us actively manage that position for you, rather than a vehicle that is effectively a weird hybrid of a passive active, because it's a passive product. Most people are kind of just buying and holding, but you're right, there was a lot of active management on the other side. So it doesn't sound like you have any sort of deep intrinsic opposition to the world of inverse volatility. It just wasn't a product category you guys utilized a lot. Yeah, it seems like these days in particular, so there's almost this religious divide in the space between people who think these products never should have existed or approved, and others who think they function as they should have, and maybe some people in the middle, kind of like myself, who think probably they function as disclaimed, but maybe they could have been disclaimed a little bit better to the average retail public, who clearly were trading these things well beyond probably a lot of people who should have been, let alone have a mutual fund, let alone be exposed to something like inverse volatility out there. Well, it's kind of interesting, I said, to catch up with you here at the conference and see what's going on. It sounds like things are really starting to get rolling over there at Northern Trust from an options perspective. So why don't we do this? Why don't we leave our listeners with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease of what they can expect from you guys in the coming months from an options perspective at Northern Trust?
Sure. It's, I've been saying this for quite a while, is where we see the most growth in our business in the short term, medium, and certainly long term is in the public space. And we're really very bullish on getting our message out there with the public fund community, foundations and endowments, and really showing them that not only as our custodian we're able to service them, but also within capital markets that we're able to be there for their prime services, execution, and then working directly with themselves if they're internally managed, or with their asset managers that they look to send mandates to.
And if people are listening to this and they're intrigued and they want to learn more, maybe contact you directly, where should they go? What should they do, Jon?
Certainly feel free to reach out to me directly. Jon Cherry, head of U.S. Options at Northern Trust.
Well, John, it's great getting you on. It's great to see that Northern Trust is taking an active interest in the options space. We always like to see more players in this space, and we'll look forward to seeing how all these initiatives unfold in the marketplace in the coming months.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.